Hey everyone, Dr. Opperman from Simplicity Health Direct Primary Care. I recently did a Facebook Live where I talked about the Delta variant, and there's a lot of good information in there. But I was very careful about just sharing data with you and not necessarily sharing my opinions, which of course aren't validated, but it's my best guess or hypothesis of what may happen next. And historically, I've kind of done this on my blog and continue to do that now. On February 28th, if you remember back, probably not, but I remember I wrote a blog post about COVID-19 and we were kind of at the height of it. Very scary at the end of February. Things were still kind of not looking great, but the vaccines were just coming out. And I had wrote on that blog post, and I'll reference it to today in this blog post, that I think COVID was coming to an end imminently, and we would stop wearing our masks and vaccines would work, and life would get back to somewhat normal in the summer. Indeed, that's what happened. I also wrote in that same blog post that don't be surprised if and when we get another COVID surge in the fall. And here we are with another COVID surge. And so some things are a little bit different than I would have anticipated. I thought we would have a better vaccine uptake than we did, unfortunately. At the time of the writing, we had 25% of the population had gotten their first doses of the vaccine, and we've really only made it to like somewhere around 50 to 55% of the population has been vaccinated so far in 6 months since I wrote that. So that was a little bit unexpected, and so I thought we would have a better vaccine response. But here we are, it's about to be September, and cases are again really starting to spike. So I wanted to give you some insight of things that I think might happen if I can predict the future. Of course, no one knows. The CDC has been historically terrible at trying to predict this. And so I think part of that has led to a lot of mistrust in our scientific community. So I want to be very, very clear with you. I don't know what's going to happen. I could be wrong. As I often say, I've been wrong before. My wife likes to tell me that all the time. But I kind of want to give you a little bit of insight of not data, strictly not data, but sort of maybe where are we going with this in the upcoming months. And I think it's going to be valuable. I'm really just not going to share this super publicly. It's going to be on the blog post. I'm going to send it out to email to the members. So just kind of give you some inside information. Again, I've been asked to share my thoughts and opinions about this from so many patients, and so I did want to share that because our patients have felt that it's been valuable. So the Delta variant, I think we all kind of know a lot about that. Its transmissibility is very high, so it spreads very, very, very quickly. So it has what's called an R naught of somewhere between 5 and 9, so call it 7. The original wild type SARS-CoV-2 or wild type coronavirus, the very first one that we had, or the alpha, that had an R naught of 3. So this is double, perhaps even a little more than double the R naught of the original. So R naught means how many people you can infect. So if I had coronavirus and I go out into public and start spreading it, that means that if I have an R naught of 3, I can expect to give it to 3 other people. With an R naught of 7, you can expect to give it to 7 other people. And the problem becomes that instead of infecting 3 people, then those 3 people go infect 3 new people, and then those 3 people, now we're talking about 7 people, infecting 7 people, infecting 7 people. And so we get this really highly exponential growth and rapid spread and transmission, and that's exactly what we're seeing right now. It has a high R naught. Actually, the R naught is very similar to chickenpox, so very highly contagious. As I mentioned in the Facebook Live video, what we are seeing is, and I'm seeing this personally on a very local level in my patients, what we're seeing is vaccinated patients tend to fare very, very well even if they get COVID. I've had several vaccinated patients that have gotten COVID. They do very well, have very mild symptoms, and sort of resolve. Unfortunately, the unvaccinated patients are literally sort of sitting ducks. With that high R naught, with the community spread, COVID is not going anywhere. So even if you don't get Delta variant, you're going to get the next variant. So it's not a matter of if, but when you're actually going to get infected with COVID. So I think you're going to get it unless you just wall up in your house for the rest of your life. So again, I think a plea would be if you haven't got vaccinated yet, I strongly encourage it. I think it's a good idea. I think we have good data. I think we have good safety. It's been out for a long time now. Well, I think a long time that we have enough safety data to say that something bad is not going to happen. With vaccines, we usually see bad safety data after 3 to 6 weeks. We've been giving the COVID vaccine for 1.5 years. That mRNA that we injected into the deltoid muscle is long gone. It's out of your system. So I think that the vaccine is very safe. What we're going to see, I think, is this rapid transmission. So the cases are going to continue to climb. Predominantly, it's going to be in unvaccinated people, and we see that in the local hospital and in nationwide hospitals. So somewhere around 97 to 90% of hospitalized patients right now are unvaccinated. So they've actually studied breakthrough cases from January through July, I believe, of COVID and people fully vaccinated. I think they studied 136 million fully vaccinated people, and it was somewhere in the 193,000 or something like that had breakthrough COVID where they were symptomatic. Basically equated to 0.1% of the population of vaccinated patients actually got some sort of symptoms. So it's pretty rare to get symptoms. The vaccine is not preventing you from getting symptoms. The vaccine is preventing severe illness, hospitalization, and death. So that's really why you want to get the vaccine. You don't want to end up in the hospital. You don't want to have that risk. And so what I've seen personally is many of my vaccinated patients, again, have very mild symptoms. That 0.1% of breakthrough cases is probably low. There's probably much more COVID cases in vaccinated people, but they're asymptomatic. So as I speak with you right now, I might have COVID. I have no idea. I feel perfectly fine. But if I have COVID and I'm asymptomatic, I'm not going to go get tested. Why would I go get tested when I have no symptoms? But I could be spreading it to 7 other people. So I'm out, and I'm not wearing my mask anywhere. So I'm in Kroger and I'm asymptomatic. I don't know I have COVID, and I'm giving it to 7 people, and those 7 people are giving it to 7 other people. And there's 1 million people just like me out there spreading it that are asymptomatic. So the breakthrough cases are probably higher, but the patients that have the vaccine are likely asymptomatic. And so there's a lot of spread of this. What I think will happen with COVID is it's going to be here for the rest of our lives. It's going to be what's called an endemic. So we're going to have COVID every year, but it's not the end of the world. I think things are going to get much, much better fairly soon, actually. If we look at England, and we look at India, we look at the Netherlands, all of these places have had these COVID spikes, and they've had them before us. So, for example, England's spike, it started, I think, in June, and it peaked like July 20th or something like that. It was approximately 40 days that it peaked. The Netherlands was even faster than that. India was all over the news. Oh my gosh, the Delta variant, it's killing all these people in India. You don't see India all over the news because the cases started to come down. In England, the Netherlands, and India, we are seeing kind of a plateau of stabilization of cases, but they have come down. So I anticipate that we're not going to be much different than that. The only thing that's interesting about the United States versus England, say, is England is kind of a one place. They kind of all practice the same philosophies. Where the United States, we have the West, we have the Midwest, we have the East Coast, we have the South, and there's a lot of different cultural differences between those different areas of the country. So in the United States, we're not so uniform in our thinking, where other places tend to be that way. So I think that we're going to see hot spots like in Texas and Florida that we're seeing now, which is actually their indoor season, right? Who wants to be outside in Texas in August? Who wants to be outside in Miami in August? It's hot. So you go inside, and so more of it spreads. We're going to see that locally here. So in the Midwest, we're going to see more COVID cases when we start getting into September and October, because people will start moving indoors more often. So as the United States, I suspect that our peak may not be as high, but it'll probably be more prolonged than we see in other countries. I would anticipate maybe the peak of our cases probably happening another maybe 2 to 3 weeks from now. So I would say our country will probably peak our COVID cases in the middle of September sometime. And then I think they'll start to drop off just like the other countries that I've mentioned, but then they'll probably plateau. And what's kind of bad about that is the timing of that. So when they start to plateau, again, it's going to be more of a winter season where respiratory viruses naturally spread. So it's going to be November, December, January, February. I think we're still going to see a pretty steady COVID caseload. However, that also means that a lot of the population is going to be infected. And so there's some good news to have here. So this is, again, very, I think, forward thinking, and I've not seen any news articles on this. I don't even know that it's going to happen, but I'm just kind of postulating or hypothesizing or theorizing, just kind of my thoughts here. It may not be the worst thing to get COVID, especially if you're vaccinated. So if I got COVID, I hope I have COVID right now because I feel great. I am not at risk of going to the hospital. I've been vaccinated. And so if I got COVID, it might not be that bad of a thing. And let me tell you why. I feel good. I'm not at risk of going to the hospital. I don't think I'm at risk of dying. But if I have COVID, that means I get exposed to those different envelope proteins, the different proteins of the virus, not just spike protein. So the vaccine that I had, the Moderna vaccine, it targets, mRNA is injected, it tells our own ribosomes to make the spike protein. And so our bodies recognize that spike protein as foreign. We create antibodies against that spike protein. So when COVID, if I encounter it and it has that spike protein, my body says, wait a second, I don't like that, that's not normal, let's eliminate this, let's get rid of it. And so that's how the vaccine works. It's all dependent on that one spike protein. However, that spike protein will mutate, it will change, and we're already seeing that changing. There's different variants, there's the iota variant, there's the lambda variant, and the lambda variant actually looks like it is pretty resistant to our vaccines. So what happens then is when that spike protein comes, or when that protein comes and it's different and my antibodies don't recognize that from the vaccine, now I'm at risk. However, if I got COVID and I got exposed to the other 29 proteins of coronavirus, or 28 proteins of coronavirus, and I didn't get sick, I'm now making antibodies to all of those other proteins. So when lambda variant or whatever variant comes along, I have some immunity to that variant as well, and I'm unlikely to get sick going forward. So getting a vaccine and getting exposed to COVID, making antibodies to those other proteins of coronavirus may not be that bad of a thing. So I think it could lead to long-term immunity. Again, we're all getting COVID eventually, so there's no avoiding it. It's just a matter of how sick are you going to get from it. So I think it's obviously better to get those antibodies and not get sick, and then have protection going forward when we have inevitably some variant that is going to be vaccine resistant. So that's kind of the path forward. So why do I say, we may have a winter that people are indoors and we kind of plateau our cases, but I think by the spring of next year, I know that sounds like a long time away because we've been dealing with this for so long, but I think by the spring of next year, my theory is this is turning into basically another flu. So we've all had some sort of exposure. We all have some sort of antibodies to it. So when the actual virus comes along, we're probably not going to get that sick from it. Yeah, you might feel bad, just like you might feel bad from flu. Yes, there are going to be people dying and people getting sick. That happens. We have 60 to 100,000 deaths every year from flu. So it's going to be around, it's going to stick around, but our previous immunity is going to help us going forward. Additionally, I mentioned this in the Facebook Live I did, viruses as they mutate tend to become weaker. So they become more contagious, but they tend to be weaker. So I think the combination of those two things will eventually bring an end to this pandemic, and then we'll just have endemic COVID every single year. There'll be new mRNA vaccines. These mRNA vaccines can be modified very quickly, and so when there is a resistant variant to the current vaccines, there'll be a new vaccine available, just like there's a new flu shot available for the different strains of flu every year. So I think that this is going to be very similar to what we see with influenza. Interestingly, we don't see a lot of influenza now, and so there is a theory that there's viral competing respiratory viruses. So we have not had a lot of flu. We have not had a lot of flu deaths because we think COVID is competing with that in that upper airway. So maybe we will replace influenza, or seasonal influenza, with seasonal coronavirus. I don't know. So anyhow, those are kind of my thoughts on this. Again, these are not scientific proven. This is not data. I am just strictly sort of guessing what may happen in the near future. So I don't think that we need to be scared of COVID, especially if you've had your vaccine. In fact, maybe it's a good thing to get COVID. If you have not yet been vaccinated, I'm all for liberty. It's your choice. You accept the risk that comes with that, and that's perfectly fine. Natural immunity is also very good. So we just want you to get it, hopefully not get terribly sick, and then recover, and then you have probably better immunity, being natural immunity, than the vaccine, because again, you've been exposed to all of the proteins of coronavirus, not just spike protein. Guys, I really hope it helps. Thanks for watching, and again, we really appreciate your membership here at Simplicity Health. Have a great day.